Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us. And this is the second part of the President's energy dominance theme. And for those who have not joined us before, my take on energy dominance is really important for three reasons. One, it's better to produce energy here under reasonable regulation than watch it be produced overseas with no regulation. As a former commander, I've seen the catastrophe of exploitation of resources overseas, particularly the Middle East and Africa, and that is not a model that we want to replicate here. Secondly, there is a social cost of not having a job. Energy, to a great degree, drives the economy, and having reliable, affordable, and abundant energy is certainly a part of creating jobs. And lastly, national security, particularly in today's environment where you have Iran continuing to test and develop ICBMs, Russia as an aggressor, and then you shift towards the Asian area. Our allies are asking us for reliable energy, and if we're going to put leverage on foreign entities, certainly through energy, is part of that plan. Up front, I'm an unabashed admirer of Roosevelt. I think Roosevelt had it right when the arch on Yellowstone Park was described for the benefit and enjoyment of the people, and we're going to do it right. It means we're going to hold industry accountable. We're looking at how to make rules and regulations and strengthening those rules and regulations by simplifying, providing stability, and streamlining the process so up front a return on investment decision can be made quickly. But reviewing some of the regulatory reforms and regulatory processes currently in place, it became evident that some of them are punitive and they don't allow industry to be innovative and actually work against environmental concerns when industry cannot innovate and do what's best, not only for return on investment, but also protect the environment. We have to look at our regulatory framework. Access, looking at our holdings onshore, about 27 million acres of BLM's land out of 700 million acres in the subsurface are under lease. We are doing assessments on that. If you look at last year in FY16, BLM canceled or postponed 11 lease sales, and that was the second lowest amount of acreage available in 20 years. The lowest was in 2011. The BLM's permitting process and time was 257 days. In statute, the requirement is 30 days on permits, and in statute by the Mineral Leasing Act, and I'll quote, lease sales shall be held for each state where eligible lands are available at least quarterly and more frequently if the Secretary of Interior determines such sales are necessary. The secretarial order that I signed holds the Department of Interior accountable to the law, both in offering lease sales and simplifying the leasing process, and I say strengthen by simplifying, make sure it's stable, and streamline the process so it's transparent to the American stakeholder, which is the public. The President has offered a America First energy policy, and as Secretary of Interior, I have signed 3 secretarial orders. The first was to evaluate our regulatory burdens and framework to make sure it's fair, transparent, and in the best interest of the U.S. taxpayer. Secondly is develop a America First offshore policy, which includes looking at a 5-year plan and doing seismic studies. As the Secretary of Interior, it's important to make sure that I know and the America knows our inventory of energy, precious metals, etc., And lastly, jump-starting an Alaskan energy production policy within the National Petroleum Reserve and the 1002 section, which was by Congress set aside for an assessment, and I signed the secretarial order to go forward on that assessment. Today's secretarial order, again, really did two things. One is it provided lease sales per the law quarterly, and secondly, it looked at the permit time, which again last year was 257 days. The statute requires 30, and when the statute was put in, 30 days seemed reasonable, appropriate, in the best interest of the public. Obviously, we've strayed away from that. So with that, I'll take questions if you have them. I'll look forward to it. And I, again, as the Secretary of Interior, I am the steward of our greatest treasures. I take that responsibility seriously. We're going to do it right. I looked at our revenues as the Department of Interior. If you go back to 2008, just in offshore, we made about $18 billion a year. Last year, we made 2.6. So we dropped $15.5 billion. And when you take that on scale, the Park Service alone has about $11.5 billion worth of maintenance backlog and repair. That revenue loss would have caught up our entire backlog and given an additional $3 billion in capital investment, which our parks desperately need. Yesterday, I was out at Antietam looking at our Civil War and war memorials, and I think we're somewhere around $250 million in arrears on even protecting our most hallowed sites.